Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Go ahead and have a seat. State your name and spell it for the record, please.
My name is Terri Stainer. It's T-E-R-R-I. Last name is S-T-A-N-E-R.
Go ahead, counsel.
Thank you. Ma'am, could you please tell us how old you are?
56.
And what area do you currently live in?
I live near Earlville.
What area did you grow up in?
I grew up over by Marshalltown.
Did you graduate from high school?
Yes.
Where did you graduate from?
Gladbrook.
And did you receive any additional schooling after that?
I went for a year for dental assisting, and I did that for a few years until I had children. And then later on, I went back to EMT and paramedic.
And what is your current occupation?
I am a critical care flight paramedic for a air ambulance service. I also work PRN at the hospital in Marshalltown as a paramedic, and I do their emergency preparedness coordination.
Did you know Amy Mullis?
Yes.
How did you know Amy?
I met Amy in approximately 2006 when she started working at Manchester Hospital, and we met there.
And in what capacity was Amy working at Manchester Hospital?
Amy was a nurse.
What was the nature of your relationship when you first met Amy?
When I first met Amy, I was working as a EMT unit secretary.
And would it be fair to say you became friends?
We became very good friends.
And when you say, what kind of things would you do together?
We did a lot together. We went out for lunch a lot. We, at one point, rented a houseboat for a week with several friends, and Amy was along, and we're up there and spent time together as friends and just socialized.
Is there anything that you and Amy would do on a regular basis or semi-regular basis?
We were golf partners for a couple years, and we did golf a lot together. We did a lot of lunches together.
What kind of things did Amy like to do?
Amy liked to golf. Amy, she was a great nurse. She liked to take care of people. She enjoyed farming. She liked to hunt and fish. And I think probably the thing she liked most was being a mom.
And why do you say that?
Because her kids came first. You know, if I wanted to do something or had something planned, and if there was something going on with her children, that came first. She loved coaching their ball games. She loved being a mom.
Now, sometime after you met Amy, did you leave Regional Medical Center in Manchester?
I did. I left within that first year, and we did remain very close friends after that.
Where were you working then when you left there?
I went down to Iowa City for about 6 months on a transport service with fixed wing air, and then I went to St. Luke's in their ER and then on their flight team.
And then at some point, did you start working again at Manchester Hospital?
I didn't start that again until probably 3 years ago. Amy and I were both on the Earlville volunteer ambulance together, so we spent a lot of time with the fire department, doing things with the fire department, fundraisers and things like that.
Do you know how long Amy worked at Manchester Hospital?
Amy worked there until, I'm thinking, approximately 5 or 6 years ago.
And do you know why she left?
She left because it was kind of a deal she made with her husband after she had her first affair, that she needed to be home and not be in that environment with a lot of other people.
Now, let me just go back 1 second. You said something about you doing some work with the fire department with Amy as well?
Right.
And what did Amy do with regards to the fire department?
She was nurse exempt, so we were on the ambulance together. We really didn't do anything on the fire side. It was just the EMS side.
So what are some of the things or duties that you have when you would be working in that capacity?
We carry pagers, and if there's a call, if you're available, you go and respond to the call.
Now, throughout your friendship with Amy, let me go back. Do you know Todd Mullis?
Yes,
How did you meet Todd?
I met Todd through Amy.
And what was your relationship like with Todd?
My relationship was fine with Todd. I didn't see Todd a lot because Todd didn't do a lot of social things. I did see him occasionally, and I think our relationship was fine.
When you would see Todd, where would you generally see him?
He came to a few of the fire department functions, and if I would stop at their house, sometimes I stop there to get eggs or drop off something with the kids or do corn or something like that, and I would see Todd there.
Would it be fair to say that you were also friendly with Todd?
Yes.
And did Todd work a lot on the farm?
Todd worked all the time. He was very, very passionate about farming.
Now, at some point in your friendship with Amy, did she start confiding in you about her relationship?
Her relationship with
Todd.
With Todd, yes.
And you already said something about this, but approximately 5 years ago, did Amy tell you any information that related to her relationship with Todd?
Yes.
And what did Amy tell you?
I distinctly remember we were golfing, and she told me that she had begun an affair with someone that would come up to the hospital quite often.
Now, after you learned that information, did you have any role with regards to Amy and Todd's relationship?
I did.
And what was your role?
I spent a lot of time talking with both of them, with Amy and with Todd, as far as what they were going to decide to do. I talked to one of our social workers at our hospital for advice for good counseling for them to go to if they wanted to make their marriage work. And so they did start going to counseling in Cedar Rapids. I feel like I had a very good finger on that pulse of how things were going between the two of them. And
how was it that you even became involved in that?
I think, if I remember correctly, it was Todd reaching out to me.
And how would you communicate with Todd?
Mostly through text.
At times throughout the years, would you sometimes also have conversations or phone conversations
Yes.
with him? And how would you communicate with Amy?
Amy I saw quite often.
Would you and Amy also at times communicate by text messages and
Yes.
phone? Now, what, if any, observations did you make about their relationship after you talked to them about it and they were in counseling?
I thought, maybe things would be able to work out for them. It took Todd a very long time. I don't think he ever really trusted Amy again. That was very hard for her. A lot of times when we were together, she would say, how long do I have to pay for this mistake? It was very regulated who she could do things with. I was on, it was kind of a joke, the approved friend list that could actually do things with Amy. She was timed when she left home and when she got back, and it was very carefully watched, her activities outside of the farm.
You indicated that you talked to Todd quite a bit as well about this affair 5
Yes.
years ago. What observations or what did you observe Todd's behavior to be like after finding out about that affair?
He was concerned a lot about the sexual part of it, like if this other person, what she was getting from that person, if there were things were better with him or not. He was very focused on this other gentleman and his family. After they started going through counseling, I kind of thought things would maybe settle down a little bit. And then Amy told me that Todd felt like the other gentleman wasn't punished enough, so he called his wife when she was at work, and she's a nurse in a care center, and told her about the affair when she was at work.
Now, I'd like to direct your attention back to the summer and fall of 2018. During that time, were you also still communicating with Amy and Todd in different ways?
Yes.
And around that time, do you remember having a conversation with Todd where he asked you some questions about Amy?
Yes.
And what was what form of communication was that?
I honestly do not remember if it was a phone conversation or a text message conversation.
But do you remember the information that Todd relayed to you?
Yes.
And what was that information?
He asked me, he said, hey, I noticed Amy's been acting strange again. She's been kind of going off into the bedroom and, spending a lot of time in there alone with her phone. She's kind of showing some of the same behaviors that she had before. And he said, so I looked at our phone bill and I saw just in one day there were 128 text messages to the same gentleman. And he asked me, do you think this is strange behavior? And I said, yes, I do. I do feel like that is strange behavior, and that he needed to talk to her and ask her, what the behaviors were and what was going on.
Now, Terri, you indicated that part of that message was asking you if you thought Amy was doing things like before.
Yes.
What did you take that to mean?
Having an affair.
At that point, were you aware of whether or not Amy was having an
No.
affair? At that point, had Amy told you about an affair?
No.
Shortly after that, did you have a conversation with Amy?
Yes.
And do you remember if that was in person or by way of phone?
It started as a text. She sent me a text message and she said, I'm in trouble and I need to talk. Something along that line.
And once you got that message, do you know if you saw her in person or if it was a phone conversation?
It was within a couple days she came over in person.
And was anybody else present for that conversation? No. During that conversation, what did Amy indicate to you?
She told me that she had started seeing their field guy that had come to their farm quite often. I didn't exactly understand what his job was or what his role was, and that Todd was very suspicious, had called this gentleman's wife and had confronted him, also asking if there was something going on between the two of them due to the volume of text messages. And she did tell me that she was having an affair with him at that time.
At that time, did Amy indicate to you any intentions about whether or not she was going to stay with Todd or leave Todd?
No. She indicated that she didn't know what was going to happen with this relationship. She said at first it started out as very sexual. He made it very clear that that's all it was about, was just having sex. And then she said, but as they progressed, they became close and it became more than just a sexual relationship.
Did you continue to meet with Amy for lunch or in
Yes.
other ways at this time?
I did.
Did you have any additional conversations with Amy about this affair and her relationship with Todd?
Yes.
And what do you remember in relation to that initial conversation about the affair when the next conversation took place?
She was, at this time, she was telling me, I'm still not sure what I want to do. Maybe I should just stick it out. Maybe I should, be with my family. She didn't know if, where, she said this Jerry was in the same boat she was. He had family, he had children at home. And so she still didn't have that relationship kind of figured out.
Terri, go ahead, sorry.
When she very first told me the very first day that she was having an affair, I was so angry at her because I told her, Amy, you're putting yourself in a really dangerous situation. And I said at that time, he is going to kill you.
And why did you say that?
Because Todd is just the person you don't mess with.
Now, during the same time that you're having these conversations with Amy, are you at times also communicating with Todd?
Yes.
And what, if anything, is Todd saying to you in these conversations?
Todd was saying that Amy at home was very moody. She was crying a lot. She was being mean to the children. He was saying that she seemed depressed. She's upset. But at the same time, he's saying this, when I was with Amy, I did not see that behavior from her. I did not see her upset and crying, and the only thing she was having a difficult time with is she felt like if she chose to continue this relationship, she would lose her son Tristan.
And did she indicate to you why she felt that?
She said that the past few months that Tristan and Todd had become very close. Prior to that, Amy and Tristan were actually a very close mother-son. Tristan would come golfing with us. You know, he'd call me Terri Bear, and he spent a lot of time with Mom. He is very soft-hearted, very kind kid. She had told me, you know, all of a sudden Todd is starting to be Mr. Super Dad, which wasn't the case before because he's so involved with the farm. He didn't take time out to go to their activities. And now he was doing things with the children, like taking them on picnics or down to their pond or fishing, which had never happened before. She said that he and Tristan were spending a lot of time together. Tristan was missing a lot of school because Todd was pulling him out to work on the farm. She was upset that Tristan stopped participating in band because his dad told him that that was for pussies. She said Tristan started like emulating his dad, the way he walked, the way he talked. Didn't want to wear underwear because his dad didn't wear underwear. I mean, he just started mimicking his dad, and he and his dad became very, very close in those few months.
Now, Terri, at the same time, did you have additional conversations with the defendant, Todd, where he was asking you if you thought that Amy was having an affair?
Yes,
And at that point, you actually knew Amy was having an affair?
I did.
What was your response to Todd when he would ask you that?
My response to Todd, I kind of sidestepped the questions because I felt like Todd and I have always had pretty straight up with each other, and I felt like I was being put in a position where I had to lie to him, which I didn't want to do because, number one, I wasn't comfortable lying with him, and but on the other hand, I felt like I needed to protect Amy because she felt like she needed time to decide what she was going to do.
And what do you remember what kind of responses you would give Todd when he would ask you if you thought Amy was having an affair?
I would tell him, Todd, you need to talk to Amy. You just need to talk to Amy. Maybe you guys need to go back to counseling. You guys need to spend time together. I said, Amy likes to be out. She can't be trapped on the farm all the time. She's social. She wants to go out. She wants to look pretty. She wants to do things, and you need to do these things with her. I told him we were going on vacation in March. I said, you guys should join us so that you guys have time together. And I said, you need to spend time with her and your family.
Now, at some point at the end of August, do you remember going to a conference for work?
Yes.
And did you hear something, or did something come to your attention during that conference at work?
So I went to a trauma conference and with other people that worked at Regional Medical Center. At that time, we were going to supper, and it was mentioned that Amy was being naughty again.
And what did you take that to mean?
That they knew she was having an affair. And I asked, where did you hear this? And the person that said it told me he heard it from his brother-in-law, who was very good friends with Todd, too. And So I knew it was out in the community.
When you heard that there were rumors going about Amy's affair, did you have any concerns?
Yes.
Why?
The next day, when we were going home, my husband told me, "You need to let Amy know." And I said, "Yes, I understand. I need Amy to know that Todd's going to hear this and that she needs to talk to Todd with Randy, her stepdad, there, and tell him the truth and what's going on before he hears it from someone else."
Did you have a conversation with Amy about that information?
Yes, I did.
And do you remember if that was in person or phone?
I sent her a text and I said, "I need to talk to you." And she goes, "Okay." She brought over I got eggs from her all the time. She brought over some eggs and I said, and it may have been some text and some talking to her in person. I told her it was out and that who had told me what was said, and she was very, very, very upset.
And during that conversation, was anyone else present?
No.
Did that conversation take place at your home?
Yes.
And what, you indicated a second ago that you said, what did you say to her about who, or what else did you say to her, I guess I'll ask?
I told her it was out, what was said, and she kept focusing on who said it, who said it, who said it. And I'm like, "Amy, that doesn't matter who said it. What matters is that it's out in the community. It's a small community. Todd's going to hear it from someone else. You need to tell him." And she kept focusing on who said it, who said it, who said it. So I told her who had said it. And she said, "I'm going to tell Todd that there's rumors out there to stop this. So if he hears it, he'll think it's just the rumor mill going around."
And what was your response when Amy told you that?
I told her she needed to be honest with him and tell him. And I told her she needed to take Randy with her,
Who is Randy?
her stepdad.
And why did you indicate to her that you thought that Randy should go with her?
Because I felt like she would be safe if Randy went with her.
And what was Amy's relationship like with Randy?
They have a very, very good relationship.
During your conversation with Amy, did she indicate to you that she was fearful of Todd?
She never came out and said she was fearful of Todd. She was more fearful of what was going on between Todd and Tristan.
Did you ever have a conversation with Amy where she told you if she came up missing what to do?
Yes.
And do you remember when that conversation was?
That conversation happened after Todd and I had kind of stopped texting or talking because I was very short with my responses to him. He said, Amy had gone to the state fair. I knew she was going to be with her friend there.
When you say her friend, is that the person she was having the
Yes.
affair with?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I encouraged Todd to go and to maybe surprise Amy and show up there so that.
Just so we're clear, so Amy was planning on going to the state fair.
Yes.
And were you aware that she was going to be meeting the man she was having the affair with?
She said they were meeting and they were staying in a hotel together.
At that same time, were you still texting and speaking with Todd at times about their
Yes.
relationship?
Yes.
Just have to wait till I ask the question because the court
Okay,
is
sorry.
taking everything down. And you just indicated a moment ago that you at some point encouraged Todd to go to the state fair.
I did.
Why did you do that?
Because I wanted him to find them together when it would be safer for her.
And what do you mean by that?
I felt like if it was in a hotel with a lot of people, that maybe things would not escalate.
Now, as you indicated, you were still, at this time, when your conversations are going on with Amy, you're still having some text conversations with Todd.
Yes.
And What other types of conversations or text conversations are you having with Todd?
Mostly with Todd by then was just, you guys need to talk, you guys need to talk. And then I can't remember what my last text was to him, but I remember his last text was, maybe everybody's lying to me about this, and then I never got another text from Todd.
Now, a minute ago, you said, we started talking about a conversation that you said happened after you encouraged Todd to go to the state fair with Amy. Is that a yes?
Yes,
And where did that conversation take place?
at my home.
And was anybody else present for that conversation?
No.
So what was the context of that conversation with Amy?
That conversation occurred, Amy had been with her family. Her uncle had had a head bleed. Her mom was trying to help take care of him. Amy went down for several days because he kept trying to get out of bed. He would fall. So Amy went down to spend nights there so that her mom could go home and rest. She had come home and went to Todd's mother's house to get Wyatt. And his mother did not want to let Wyatt go with her.
And would that have been sometime in October 2018? And did that conversation, was that text message or was it in person or both?
She sent me a text and she said, "Can you talk?" And I said, "Give me a couple minutes." And then I called her and she was crying. She was upset. I couldn't hardly understand her. I said, "Amy, what's going on?" She said that she went to get Wyatt. Elaine said, "He's not going with you because everybody knows you're crazy Amy. Everybody in the neighborhood's calling you crazy Amy. You're crazy Amy. You're not taking this kid because you're crazy Amy." And Amy's like, "What are you talking about?" And she said, it's harvest, it's a busy time for this family. You shouldn't have been gone. You should have been home and taking care of your children and your family." And Amy goes, "I needed to be with my uncle. I needed to help my family." And he kept falling out of bed, and Elaine said, "Well, they just tie those people to the bed, and that's what they should do to him. And you could have been home with your family." So Amy was very upset. She had texted Todd. She did not text Todd. She got a text from Todd that said, "Do not go with your mother. She's crazy." It was a text intended for Tristan that went to Amy.
Terri, when you say Elaine, is Elaine Todd's mother?
Yes.
Now, during any of your conversations with Amy, did she ever tell you about an area to look for her if she was ever missing?
Yes, it was the same day after we had the conversation on the phone. She came to my home. She was crying. She was red-faced. She had mascara running down her face. She was very upset. She said she needed to talk to Todd. She didn't understand why he would say that to Tristan. And she said, "Terri," or she called me Terri. She said, "Terri, if I ever come up missing, have them look in our new timber." And I said, "Amy, you have got to get Randy here, and you've got to go talk to Todd."
Did Amy say anything else to you during that conversation that you recall?
No, she was just very tearful. She was going to go home and talk to Todd after she left my home.
Did you ever have a conversation with Todd when you indicated to him that maybe him and Amy should get a divorce?
Yes.
And was this in person, on phone, or text, if you remember?
I believe it was text.
And do you remember when that conversation was?
I think it was around, possibly, if I can remember, around the time of the state fair. Amy had kind of indicated, I knew she was going to be seeing this gentleman there. She had kind of indicated that maybe things were going very well with him, and that she was thinking that that's maybe something she wanted to do. She wanted to be with him. And so I felt like maybe if I prepared Todd just a little bit, and said, hey, Todd, maybe you two really aren't meant for each other. Maybe you two would be better off not being together.
And do you recall what Todd's response was?
He said, I have worked for this farm since I was 11, and I will not give it up.
Terri, do you remember having a conversation with Amy the week before her death?
Yes.
And was that a phone call or was that in person?
She sent me a text and said, hey, I need to talk to you, so I give her a call. She told me she was having surgery, wanted to know if I could come and take her to surgery and pick her up. And I told her I couldn't. I was working that day in St. Luke's. And so she goes, well, it's kind of, Todd's really busy right now. I don't know if he'll take me. But she said, I'll figure it out.
And did you learn that later Todd did take her for that
Yes.
procedure? Did you text Amy about that procedure after she had it?
I did.
And what was the context of that conversation?
I said, hey, how'd the ablation go? Because I had had the same procedures, so I kind of knew what it was, what she was going through. We had talked a little bit about that before, like, hey, I did this, it's okay, it's very simple. And so I texted her, I believe, on the 7th and said, how'd the ablation go? And she responded, it went really well. She said, it's so much better. There's just a little tiny trickle of blood instead of me bleeding heavily like I did the last 40 days. She said, I'm going to take it easy today, but I feel pretty good.
And just, do you know what an ablation is with your medical background and with having that procedure?
Yes.
What is it?
So when someone has very heavy menstruation, a lot of times, especially if they become anemic, they will go in with, it's almost kind of like a water bottle, and they heat up the uterine lining, and it kind of burns that lining off so that they don't have those heavy periods anymore. There's no nerve endings in the uterus, so it's not painful. But
Terri, when did you have that same procedure done? If you
I
remember.
had it done probably about 5 years prior to Amy having hers done, or before Amy had hers done.
And what was your recovery like?
I had no problems. I went back to work within the next day or two, and I had no problems with it at all.
Now, Terri, you indicated that some of these conversations with both Amy and Todd were by way of text message.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Were all of these conversations with either of them or both of them only text message, or were they in other forms as well?
Some were phone calls, and some were in person. I never met in person with Todd. Todd was either through text or phone calls.
And did you at some point hand over some of those text messages to the police?
I did.
Do you have, you've prior to today looked at those text messages?
I did.
Do those text messages entail every conversation you've testified about?
No.
And why not?
I had gotten a new phone, and so I wasn't quite used to my new phone, so I would accidentally delete things. Sometimes if I became irritated, I would just delete a text. And I did make Travis aware that I had probably deleted some text messages, and I said, if you need to go in my US Cellular and look those up or whatever you need to do, you're welcome to. But I did delete some of those messages.
And is Travis Hemaseth
Yes.
one of the investigators in this
Yes.
case? Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
Terri, I'm going to show you what's been previously marked as State's Exhibit 66, Group Exhibit. If you could just briefly look through all of those pictures.
Okay.
There's some on the back, too.
Okay. They look familiar.
And Terri, in that group exhibit, State's Exhibit 66, are those screenshots of the text messages that you tendered to the Delaware County Sheriff's Department?
Yes,
And do they appear to be true and accurate copies of the messages that you gave to those officers?
they are.
Your Honor, at this time, I would ask that State's Group Exhibit 66 be admitted into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
66 is admitted?
And at this time, Your Honor, I would ask permission to publish to the jury and ask some additional questions.
Yes, go ahead.
Terry, I'm showing you one of the first messages, I believe it's the first message in your pack. It indicates, you can either see it up on the
I
screen.
can see it.
I think you have them in front of you. And it indicates that at the bottom there, you and Amy on July 26, 2018 had a conversation.
Yes,
And this is Amy's number in your phone, correct?
yes,
Would it be fair to say that Amy Mullis was Amy Mullis in your phone?
Yes.
And I believe Todd was Todd in your phone?
yes.
And in this message at the bottom there, what kind of information are you and Amy exchanging?
At the bottom,
Yes.
that's when she asked me if we could talk because she was in trouble.
And I'm going to go to the next page. And what does this page show here?
That was when her grandma had passed away, and she was at her grandma's.
And at the bottom there in the left-hand corner in the gray area, is that Amy's response to you?
Yes.
And can you just summarize there what she's talking about?
She was talking about their relationship. They hadn't been intimate for a very long time. Todd was sleeping out in the living room. So I think she went to talk to him a little bit about, she didn't tell him about the affair, but just talked to them about their marriage.
And I'll go to the next page here. In the middle there, I know that the top part of the gray part continues your conversation from the prior page. In the yellow area, would it be fair to say the yellow area is your responses to
Yes.
Amy? And in that area, who are you talking about when you're talking about Amy's friend?
Jerry.
And that's the person she was having the affair with.
Yes,
And you're also indicating to her that you think she should talk to Todd.
I did.
And then at the bottom there in the gray is Amy's response to you.
Yes.
And on the next page, I think you're following along with the exhibits in front of you. I know the jury can see for themselves and they'll be able to look at these, but on this page, are you continuing to talk about Amy and her relationship with Jerry?
Yes.
And then I'm going to go to the next page. And at the bottom there, I believe it indicates Friday, August 3rd, 2018.
Okay.
Do you see that? Mm-hmm. Is that a yes?
Yes.
And underneath that is a response or a question to you from Amy, has Todd texted you anymore?
Yes.
And what is Amy referring to there?
I had told Amy that I had been talking to Todd, and she asked if he had texted me anymore recently, so I said no.
And at the bottom there, after you say no, what does Amy start talking to you about?
Todd had called Jerry's wife at the very beginning before I even started talking to him and asked if they were having an affair, or if she thought Jerry and Amy were having an affair. I believe she said that she felt like their marriage was fine. At this point, Todd called her again and asked her again if everything was okay in their marriage.
And I believe that part of the conversation carries on to the next page. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you guys are still talking about her relationship with Jerry. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then I'll just go to the next page here. And is this one, you and Amy, talking about meeting for lunch and also continuing to talk about her relationship with Jerry?
Yes. This was after the state fair.
And then I'll go to the next page. I think that this is just a continuation of some of your conversations. Is that correct?
Correct.
And I'll go to the next page. At the bottom of this page,
Yes.
is there a conversation that talks about Todd?
Yes.
And what's the nature of that conversation? What's the nature of that conversation?
We had gone to lunch together, and after lunch, Amy texted me that if Todd happened to ask what time she left, I believe, yes, then she said to tell him around 1.
And do you know why she told you that?
Because she was meeting with Jerry.
And that conversation carries to the next page as well?
Yes. And I did not answer her that I would say that to Todd because I felt like I needed to be as honest with him as I could, and I wasn't going to cover for her.
And I'll go here to the next page. And in the middle of this page there, in the gray area where Amy is talking to you, can you just explain what that conversation's about?
That conversation is after the trauma conference, when I sent her a text and said, give me a call. And then I told her about the rumors being out.
And then your conversation is talking about those rumors and how she's planning on telling Todd about them?
Yes.
I'll go to the next page here. And I know I'm asking you to kind of quickly look at them, but what's a summary of these text messages?
This is where she had talked to Todd about the rumors, and I think she really wanted him to believe they were just rumors, and that she had told him about the rumors and who had been saying certain things.
And then if I go to the next page, at the top there, what is Amy talking about?
We had talked a lot about if she was going to leave, and I felt like he was being a player, and I told her that, and he would tell her, you know, because Amy's clothes came from Goodwill and things like that, and he would say things to her like, wow, Amy, when we're together, we're going to burn all your Goodwill clothes and go get you a beautiful wardrobe. And so I've kept asking her if he was really going to leave his wife or not. And she felt like possibly so, but she was also to the point where she felt like she was strong enough to leave on her own, if that was the case. It was not so much anymore she would leave for him, but she would leave on her own. She said she was quietly looking for jobs and somewhere to live.
And if I go to the next page, are you carrying on this conversation?
Yes. She had talked about how Todd was being Mr. Super Dad and all of a sudden showing a lot of interest in the kids. And I said, well, maybe he's really trying. Maybe he wants to be a better dad. And she said, really, how long is it going to last?
And I'll go to the next page here. And I know she sends you a picture of a Coke bottle. At the bottom, you guys are talking about getting together again.
Yes.
And on the next page, I believe it's just also you guys talking about getting together and when you're going to get lunch again.
Yes.
And if I go to the next page here, just summarize this. I think it's the same type of thing.
We were trying to get together, and we had planned on going for lunch, and I had taken a transfer for the hospital to, I don't remember, it was like somewhere clear on the other side of the state, Carroll or somewhere, and I was very tired, so I said I really didn't feel like going out for lunch, and then she thought about just bringing something over and coming to my house.
And I'll go to the next page here. And at the top there in the gray, on the left, the first full gray message, what is Amy talking about there?
She said she had been sick with a cold. She kind of understood how I felt, and she didn't get out of bed much the day before because she wasn't feeling very well.
And she's talking about being at the hospital with her uncle?
Yes.
I'll go to the next page. And I believe this is the text where you're saying, I know you described this in your testimony, where you tell her to pick something up and come on over so you guys
Yes.
can talk. Is that yes? And again, I think this is just a continuation of that conversation. Does that seem right?
Yes.
And on the next page, I think the top half is you guys continuing that conversation.
Yes.
And the bottom half, which indicates Monday, October 15th, 2018, Amy sends you a text, can you talk?
Yeah.
And that's when, I think you indicated earlier, you told her, give me some time and then we can talk.
Yes, I did.
And on the next page, you send Amy a message.
This was after our conversation on the phone.
And what are you talking about here on the top right corner in the yellow, your response to Amy?
This was after she had called, and she was so upset because Elaine did not want to give her son, and she was upset and crying. And after I thought about it, I'm like, this is kind of how their relationship had always been. Elaine's kind of the matriarch of the family, and is very controlling. And so I answered back to her this, because I thought it was terrible that she suggested they just tie her uncle to the bed. And then after that, Amy stopped at the house.
And so these conversations are after you talk on the phone, but before Amy stops over.
Yes.
And then at the bottom there is, it refers to Tuesday, October 30th, 2018.
Yes.
And Amy sends you another message, can you talk, won't take long.
Yes.
And I'll go to the next page. And then I think you're again talking at the top about you being home and you can talk.
Yes.
And then at the bottom, what are you guys talking about there on the bottom? After November 7th, 2018, I apologize.
About the cramping?
Yes.
She's talking about, I asked her how her ablation went. I was in Des Moines for another conference at that time, so I sent her a text and said, hey, how did the ablation go? And that was her response, that it went very well. She was cramping a little bit, and she was just going to chill that day.
And then on the next page, I know you indicated that you had an ablation yourself.
Yes.
And are you talking to her about your experience with your ablation?
Yes.
And she responds to you.
Yes, she did.
And then on the next page, did she send you a picture?
She sent me a picture of her IV site because she had had a lot of bruising. And being as I started a lot of IVs and stuff in my career, that she knew I would find that kind of amusing because she did bruise pretty good.
And it indicates there that that was Friday, November 9th.
Yes.
Was that the last time that Amy sent you any type of message?
Yes.
And was that the last time that you spoke to Amy?
Yes.
And that was by way of text message?
Yes.
Now, you also indicated that there were some text messages that you gave to the police that you had with Todd.
Yes.
You can go to the next one, please. And I guess now it shifts and Todd's messages are in gray. Does that seem fair
Yes.
to say? And your responses are in yellow.
Correct.
And looking at this text message, what is Todd saying to you at the beginning on August 6, 2018?
He had been telling me about Amy not sleeping, being short fused with him and the children, that he was kind of staying away from her because of her being moody.
And then on the next page, your message is with Todd. What is he indicating to you here in that top gray message?
He said he was looking up what could be wrong with her, why she was so moody, why she seemed depressed, and he thinks, thought maybe it was premenopause. He sounded like her symptoms. So I encouraged him to keep trying.
And you say, good for you, keep trying.
Yes.
And Todd does respond to you and says, thanks for the support. I've got
Yes.
nothing to lose. And then if you go to the next page, you're continuing to talk to Todd a little bit about this.
Yes.
And he indicates to you, I'll keep at it, but she doesn't make it easy.
Yes.
And then if you could just summarize, because I know that's kind of a long message there in the bottom left, what you guys are talking about there.
He was saying that Amy was just laying around, she was being lazy, she wasn't doing things, she wasn't, taking care of the lawn, she wasn't taking care of the home, she wasn't, is going and doing things with the pork producers. I think at this time she was probably doing a lot of stuff with Taylor and her gymnastics, and that she was getting massages, she was doing all kinds of other things, but not doing her responsibilities on the farm.
Now go to the next page here. I think the top part continues that conversation that you just described.
Yes.
And then your response is in summary, you're trying to encourage him to hang out with Amy and do things with Amy.
Yes. And that's when I encouraged him to go to the fair.
And this is when you indicated that you were kind of hoping he would find out about the
Yes.
affair. And what is Todd's response when you're kind of encouraging him to go to the fair?
His response basically was that she's going to be busy, and he didn't feel like she wanted him there anyway.
And then I'll go to the next page. And again, that top conversation kind of continues from the one before.
Correct.
And at the bottom there, I believe that's another text from Todd to you.
Yes, it is.
And what is that referring to?
It was after Amy and I had gone to lunch, and he said she seemed like she was in a better mood when she got home.
Then I'll go to the next page. And I know that your response after that conversation is, I just want you guys to figure things out.
Yes.
And at the bottom there, Todd is responding to you about your lunch, I believe.
Yes, he is.
I'll go to the next page. No, this is Thursday, August 30th, 2018, and there's a long gray message that was from Todd. What is Todd talking to you about in this message?
He is talking about, after I had told Amy about the rumors being out, so he is talking about her after she told him. He said suddenly she was nice to him, and he was wondering how they got out, how they started. He said he felt like it was weird since he only talked to one guy about it, and Amy's stepdad, and that he did tell me about the problems. He said that she cried a lot that night, and said she should leave because we're better off without her.
Now, in this text message, it indicates, I guess I did tell you about text problem.
Yes.
Do you know what Todd is referring to in that part?
What I felt like he was referring to is that he had told me I knew about what was going on, and I think he felt like maybe I had said something to someone.
And when he says text problem, did you think he meant the 128 text messages?
Yes.
He told you that were between Amy and Jerry.
Yes.
And I'll go to the next page. And at the top there, Todd is indicating to you that things are pretty good. Is that true?
That day was
I'm sorry,
was
on a good note, most of today was good.
Yes.
And you indicate she needs some counseling, Todd, for her own sake.
Yes.
And why did you respond with that message?
Because Amy was when I talked to her, didn't know what she was going to do, didn't know how to go on with her life as far as when she left, if she was going to be with Jerry, if she was going to be on her own. And I felt like this was maybe a way she needed to talk to someone out of the situation and maybe figure out. I said to her, you need to figure this out without Jerry, to figure out what is going on with you, that you can get your life together first before you have a relationship. The suggestion to Todd was, Amy did need to go see someone. I meant it as so she could get on with her life and figure things out.
And then Todd responds to you that he thinks it would be hard to get her into counseling.
Yes.
And I'll go to the next page.
Yes.
Let me. Now, in this text message at the top, you and Todd are talking about a conversation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then in the middle there, underneath where it says 8 p.m., there's a text message to you from Todd. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is that text message?
This is referring to the rumors being out and who was saying them.
Because at the top, you're talking about the rumors.
Yes.
And when you say rumors, what rumors is that?
The rumor I had heard at the conference about, and it was out in the community, that Amy was having an affair.
And you respond, it doesn't really matter who said it. Weird, they are out there.
Yes, because they were both Todd and Amy were very focused on who said who I heard it from.
And Todd responded to you, either weird or true, and everyone is lying to me.
Yes.
And then I know at the bottom there, you then send Todd a text after you hear of Amy's death.
Right.
Anything else? Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, cross-examination.
Ma'am, I just wanted, I want to make sure I understand the history of you and your relationship with Amy and Todd, okay?
Okay.
You said you met Amy when you were both working at the Manchester Hospital about 2006,
I believe so, yes.
and you began to not only have a working relationship, a friendly relationship, but also a social one,
Yes.
including houseboats and golfs and lunches and so forth.
Correct.
How long after you met Amy at the Manchester Hospital did you then change employment situations?
Probably within a year, 6 months to a year.
And I believe you said you associated with the hospital in Iowa City?
It was a ambulance service in Iowa City.
And then subsequently to St. Luke's.
Correct.
How long were you at this ambulance service in Iowa City, and when would you have started working at St. Luke's approximately?
I started at St. Luke's in August of 2007.
Okay. And that's still a position that you hold, or at least you still work for St. Luke's in some degree?
Yes.
And you said 2007.
Correct.
After you changed from Manchester Hospital to the ambulance service and then to St. Luke's, how was your relationship with Amy then?
We still remain very good friends.
Okay. And were you still living in Earlville?
No, I was living in Manchester at that time.
Okay. Even though you were working for this ambulance service in Iowa City?
Yes, I went to the ambulance service in Iowa City because they did fixed wing patient care, and that's what I had wanted to do.
Would you then commute?
Yes, I did.
Same thing with St. Luke's?
Correct.
Okay. The next thing in my notes is I have is that you and Amy both did volunteer work for the Earlville Fire Department.
Yes, we did.
When did that begin, approximately?
I probably started that in, I can't even tell you for sure, 2008, 2009.
Was Amy still working at Manchester Hospital then?
Yes.
You indicated that you met Todd through Amy and that you didn't have a lot of contact with him, at least directly.
No, not socially. Amy usually did things on her own.
You described him as being very passionate about his farming.
Yes, he is.
Then, about 5 years ago, 2013 plus or minus, in a golf outing, she tells you that she's had an affair.
Yes, she did.
And your reaction to that was to try to guide both Amy and Todd into some counseling to preserve the marriage.
I did.
And they took your advice. They went to counseling together, right?
They did.
You commented that it seemed that, though, that after this revelation that she had had this affair, that Todd seemed to have a hard time getting over it. Is that right?
Correct.
And that he was more wanting to know where she was at, who she was at, that kind of thing.
Yes, he did.
Okay. Do you know, did either of them ever share with you what the counselors were suggesting that they do in terms of repairing this relationship?
No.
So you don't know that the counselor was telling both of them that Amy had to be accountable to Todd because of her infidelity?
Yes, she did say that, yes. And I do believe Todd told me that too.
Okay. From that time in 2000, let's say 2013, when you learned of that affair, and I'm not saying that's exactly right, but from that point up until 2018, last summer, how much contact were you having with Amy during that period of time?
I saw her on ambulance calls. I saw her at fundraisers. We went to lunch together quite often. We golfed on a league.
And this was during this period of time, Amy had left her employment at the Manchester Hospital.
She did.
So she was a full-time, stay-at-home mom, farmer.
Yes, she was.
Did you have much direct contact with Todd during those years?
No. Occasionally, if I stopped at the farm to pick up eggs or something like that, I did, but he was always very, very busy, so you didn't see Todd often.
When you said that, if my notes are correct, you said that in the summer of 2018, Todd contacted you and said that Amy's acting strangely, and mentioned these text messages.
Yes, he did.
At that time, did you know about Amy's affair with Jerry?
No, I did not.
And your reaction was, you guys need to talk.
Yes. I did tell him I felt like it was odd behavior and that he needed to talk to her about it and ask her about it.
When did you know for sure, and I guess what I'm asking you is, when did Amy tell you about the second affair with Jerry?
It would have been after the first text where she said that she was in trouble.
So I hope this doesn't get real confusing, but I want to kind of talk about some of these text messages that were in that exhibit that the state was showing you, okay?
Okay?
And just so I can kind of find my place, there's a message on Thursday, July 26th, that started out, looks like on a completely unrelated subject, but then she says, "Can you talk? I'm in trouble."
Yes,
That's what the one you're talking about.
correct,
So we're talking July 26, 2018.
correct.
And your response, I believe, was, "Yes, I can talk anytime. Want to meet somewhere or phone?"
Correct.
By the time you texted that response, did you know that "I'm in trouble" meant she was having an affair?
I had a bad feeling.
Okay.
I did not know for certain.
But also, well, excuse me. Then on Monday, July 30th, "How are you doing?" This is you to her. "How are you doing? I know your grandma was special to you." Her grandma had passed.
Correct.
And she follows that with, "Been the longest, crappiest week of my life." We saw that on the screen.
Correct.
Was the longest, crappiest week of my life due to the death of her grandmother?
I believe it was both things combined, the death of her grandmother and the stress over having the affair.
Because she goes on in that crappiest week of my life message to talk about Todd.
Correct.
And you seem to be responding that it sounds like you're having doubts of whether or not Jerry's going to really follow through and have a life with her.
I did.
Because you ask her, "Are you 100% certain he's going to do it?"
I did.
And her response was, "I'm 99% sure."
Yes, she did.
During that time here up until July 30th, were you having any text messages or phone conversations with Todd?
I would have to look through to see exactly when I talked to Todd.
If my notes are correct, if you look to August 6th in the messages between you and Todd, do you have those up there with you?
Yes.
It's the very first page of your communication or text messages with Todd. It's right after the photo she sent you of her IV site.
Okay. And what are you referring to?
Does that appear to be the first text communication that you'd had with Todd during the summer?
The IV, where she's showing me the IV site?
No, the next page where you're communicating with Todd.
The first one would have been in July that I talked to Todd.
A phone conversation?
I honestly do not remember if our first conversation about the 128 text messages was phone or if it was a text.
Okay, all right. There was a text message with Todd, and if you can find it, on August 16th, where he talked about doing research about premenopause. Well, it may be on the page before. I believe the date is August 16th.
Okay?
That's the message you got from Todd, right?
We lost it.
right above how are things,
Yes,
August 16.
yes,
So the next page, Todd's talking about his researching,
yes,
okay. And you respond, good for you. Keep trying.
correct.
In your opinion, was Todd trying to understand what Amy's situation was, what her behaviors were?
You want my opinion?
Well, you told him to keep trying.
My opinion was he was trying to make Amy seem like she was crazy.
That's your opinion.
That's my opinion.
He never said that to you.
Nope.
You continue to have text exchanges with Todd.
I did.
And I believe on August 17th, was when he contacted you about her not doing her farm work and chores and housework and so forth. You remember that?
Yes,
And that's, you responded that, get someone to watch the kids, go to the fair.
I did.
At that point, I didn't find it anywhere else in your statements, that you were trying to get her caught,
I was.
but at that point, there didn't seem to be, from the text message and so forth, anything of grave concern here.
I did not want to anger Todd. I didn't want to lie to him. I wanted to give Amy time to figure out what she was doing. But on the other hand, I was very fearful for her. I had mentioned several times that she needed to tell Todd what was going on with her stepdad with her. And I felt like if he found them there would be a lot of people around.
Well, you've talked about that. Did you ever witness any inappropriate physical contact between Todd and Amy?
No.
Did you ever hear about any?
Only on one occasion when she was talking about, he was angry at her and pushed her down on the bed and had very rough sex with her.
Do you know when that happened?
I do not recall. It was at some time during this conversations we'd been having at the end of the summer.
Let me go to a different place. You said you attended a medical conference and someone there told you that Amy was doing bad things again.
Yes,
Where was that conference at? Do you remember?
Des Moines.
And it appeared from the exhibits that went up that on August 29th, you texted Amy and said, you need to give me a call.
I did.
And she responded with a text about a half hour later. I'm going to talk to Todd and ask him if he talked to anyone about calling Jerry's wife because of the text. If I tell him the rumors is there before he hears it, it may help.
That was after she had called me.
Right, you'd had a conversation.
Correct.
And then you responded, I don't know Ames, you need to talk to him,
Yes,
meaning Todd.
correct,
And she makes a comment, this is not what I needed.
correct.
So would it be fair to say that Amy's very concerned and upset that there's rumors about her having another affair?
Yes,
And did it appear, well, let me ask you this. Would it be fair to say that she is understanding from what you told her that you were at this medical conference is that these rumors were coming from the Manchester hospital?
I did not understand that they were told to me by an employee from the Manchester Hospital, yes, that I was at the conference with.
Okay. Because I think we'll learn later today that we now know that Amy called an employee at the Manchester Hospital that same day,
She did.
very upset, asking that these rumors be squelched.
Yes.
And if we look at the text messages between you and Todd on August 30th, he contacts you and said Amy did talk to him.
Yes.
Said she was upset, cried a lot. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And then goes on to say, on a good note, most of today was a good day.
He did.
We joked a little.
Yes, I think Amy felt like she was in the clear for a while.
So Todd's reaction to Amy telling him that there's new rumors about her having another affair is that they had a good day and they joked a little. I'm just asking, isn't that what the messages say?
That's what my messages say, yes.
Okay. And you once again, you encourage them to get some counseling.
I did.
And his response on that same day, the only way to get her there is to drag her there. I told her weeks ago that she had the problem, so I should go because I become a super dad, in her words, and the kids come to me first, and she gets mad so fast. She's very different at home. Just ask the kids.
Correct. I did not see any of that from her.
On September 1st, you and Amy started out with you saying, "How is it going?" She said, "Okay, at the water park with kids, Todd and I have talked. He knows the word is out there. Not sure what's going to happen next. Guess time will tell."
Correct.
And there continues to be some messages between you and her about her struggling with, should I stick it out, make the marriage work, should I leave, that kind of thing.
Yes.
And I think, and I'll summarize perhaps, that the content there in those messages is you were encouraging to do this on your own. Don't depend on Jerry or anybody else. Make your own decision.
Yes, I did. Can I make something clear?
Just a moment, please.
Okay.
I'm going to jump backwards a little bit. It looks like on August 22nd, you were having some email exchanges, or text message exchanges with Amy. She's talking about lunch. this would have been right after the state fair, right? August 22nd?
Correct.
Had Amy shared with you that she was disappointed because her and Jerry weren't able to hook up the way they wanted?
Yes, she did.
And at 9:06 on August 22nd, she says, after lunch, I'm going to meet Jerry. We had a little setback and we need to meet for some makeup sex.
Yes, she did.
And then the lunch plans continued.
Correct.
Next day, the 23rd, thanks for the chat. Missed that. If Todd happens to ask, I'll be calling him. We chatted till 1 o'clock. But I doubt he'll text you. Don't wait so long for our next lunch. Did it appear that she was using you as a cover for meeting Jerry?
That time it did, but I did not answer her that yes, I would cover for her. I just dropped that subject because I did not want her to feel like I would enable her in that situation. I was there to support her, not judge her, but not enable her.
And it looks like that same day, Todd was texting you, and he seemed very appreciative that she was having lunch with you, and she seemed to enjoy that and make her feel better.
Yep.
During the months of September and October, how much contact were you having with Amy?
It varied. During the fair, maybe not quite as much. Occasionally, pretty much it was either we would go to lunch or text once in a while on the phone.
Well, this was September and October. This was after the medical conference, and rumors are flying, and Amy talked to Todd, Todd texted you, and so forth, right?
Correct.
All that was around August 28th, 9th, September 1, right in that condensed time, right?
It's just confusing because I was at two separate conferences real close together there.
Okay. But after that flurry of activity and exchanges, in September and October, you said your contacts with Amy kind of trailed off?
They weren't as frequent. We still communicated, we still went out to lunch, but it wasn't quite as often.
And if I understand some of the other testimony in the trial, this was a time period when Amy's uncle suffered a brain bleed,
Yes, he did.
and he was in very critical condition in the hospital, and then later transferred to a rehabilitation center in Des Moines called On With Life.
Yes.
Were you and Amy exchanging her concerns and her attention to that matter as that went on?
We did talk about her uncle, yes.
Do you know if that situation with her uncle led her to spend some time traveling back and forth to wherever he was being hospitalized?
I believe she stayed down there for several days with her uncle so her mom could have some relief from sitting with him. He was getting up and falling, so they needed a sitter with him to make sure he didn't get hurt.
During September and October, did you have much contact with Todd at all?
No.
Did you know enough about the farm life that this was quickly moving into harvest season for him?
Yes.
Did Amy talk about that?
No.
While this thing with her uncle was going on, his health concerns, was Amy sharing anything with you about her either continued or discontinued relationship with Jared?
We did not talk about that relationship quite as much then. I was trying to let her work it out in her own mind, what she was going to do. I didn't know what she was thinking she was going to do or choose. I know she was very concerned about her children.
I'm not going to try to hunt for it right now, but I believe there was some message between you and her at some point where she talked about him being the super dad all of a sudden,
Yes.
and that there was some hope that, or comment by you perhaps, that maybe he could continue to be.
I did. Because she was trying to decide at that time if she would stay there because of the children or if she wanted to leave. And I said maybe Todd would, be the person she wanted or needed him to be.
You said that after the revelation of the first affair, that it seemed that, or there were indications anyway, that Todd was very controlling and suspicious or wanting to know where she was at and so forth.
Yes.
Was that continuing in last year, in July, August, September?
That continued the whole time after the affair. The first affair.
All the way from 5 years ago up and through?
Yes.
Did Amy ever say that she was limited in having money to buy things, shop?
Yes, she did.
Would you be surprised that she had an unlimited access to a Cabela's credit card?
I don't believe she went up to Cabela's very often.
Walmart?
I do believe that most of her and the children's clothing were Walmart and Goodwill.
Did you ever go to Goodwill with her?
A couple times.
Do you know, at least from the spring of 2018 until the time of her death, you said that this controlling, knowing where she was at all the time, that continued?
That did continue.
Do you know, can you explain how she would manage to have arranged to have sex with Jerry at least 100 times, according to him?
I did ask Amy where they were meeting because I didn't know, and she said that things would take place at another hog facility that was being built near them or at their own facility. She did say that at one point someone came to the facility, the newly built one, when she was there with Jerry. So from what I understood from her, they weren't meeting in hotels or houses or anything. They were meeting on the farms near her home.
But according to Jerry, they were meeting at hotels sometimes.
I did not know that from Amy.
So she wasn't being scrutinized 24/7 by Todd, I mean.
I would imagine it would be very hard with how hard he works. Yes.
You mentioned that Amy had texted and talked to you directly about Todd contacting Jerry's wife.
Yes.
Do you know that he'd contacted Jerry also?
Yes.
Did Amy share with you what her understanding of Jerry's response to Todd's inquiry was?
She said that Jerry denied the relationship and that they were just friends.
Did she have a comment about if she knew how Jerry's wife had responded?
She said that Jerry's wife responded that she felt like their marriage was solid. After the first conversation with Todd. After the second conversation, Amy said that she thought, Jerry's wife thought Todd was crazy and blocked him from Facebook.
Okay. Do you know for sure if Todd ever was on Facebook?
I don't know what Todd looked at.
Okay. I believe it was in mid-October, that's when Amy was very upset about her, I'll call it a run-in with Todd's mother.
Correct.
Did Amy tell you that it seemed like she appreciated that Todd had stuck up for her in that situation?
She did not feel that way as far as when she talked to me due to the text he had sent Tristan.
But Todd did not defend his mother the way she had treated her.
That I don't know.
So I guess just to summarize here, that we had affair number one, you played an integral role in getting them into counseling and preserving the marriage. That would be a pretty fair assessment, right?
That's fair.
And then near the end of August, which you knew there was another affair already occurring, it appeared that the cat might be out of the bag, that rumors were out there that she was having another affair.
Correct.
You talked to her, she says, I'm telling Todd, and she did.
She told him about the rumors.
Right. Oh, right. I didn't want to misstate that. But Todd's reaction is, we've talked about it, just nothing really happened after that, right?
I'm not sure of the timeline, but I believe that's maybe when he talked to Jerry or Jerry's wife again. I'm not sure, I think.
But your contacts with Amy kind of lessened. You'd still have lunch or talks or text messages and so forth.
I distanced myself a little bit because I didn't want to be put in that position. I felt like I wanted Amy to talk to Todd about what was going on. And I didn't want to have to be, or didn't feel like it was my place to be the one to tell Todd what was happening. But I felt like I was very uncomfortable, maybe not lying to him, but that's why I always deflected his questions, because I didn't want to come out and Amy needed time to figure out what she was doing with her life.
Did Amy tell you that after the end of August, 1st of September, when this rumor issue arose, that this Jerry Frazier continued to be a farm management person for their hog operation?
Yes, he did.
So that business relationship between Jerry and the Mullis farm didn't change?
No, she was very concerned that his place of employment would find out and that he would be fired. So she was very concerned about that.
Well, it would be fair to assume, wouldn't it, that Todd didn't say, I don't want anything to do with you, or I'm suspicious of you, or I'm going to call your employer. None of that ever happened.
I'll let her answer to her knowledge. Go ahead.
To my knowledge, he did not call Jerry's place of employment.
All right, thank you, ma'am. That's all the questions I have.
Redirect.
Terri, I just have one question.
Okay.
The defense attorney just asked you about those conversations that you initially had with Todd about the rumors. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that initially he said that they talked about the rumors, and then Todd said it seemed like today was a good day.
Yes.
And then I'm going to put up here on the screen from Group Exhibit 66. There was some additional text messages after that where you're again talking about those rumors.
Yes.
And in fact, at the top, Todd writes, she told me Spencer told you Doug said that.
Yes.
And that's referring to the people that told you about those rumors.
Yes, correct.
Todd then says, so are rumors bad? And you respond, yes, it doesn't really matter who said it. We're there, out there.
Yes.
And then Todd responds either weird or true, and everyone is lying to me.
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Mr. Firehelm, anything else for her? Okay, thank